Well, good morning. Thank you. Morning. If you're in Africa and you say good morning, normally you get a better response than that. So I'm Michael Joseph. I started Safaricom in 2000, which I went to Kenya. Seems like a very long time ago in 2000, and I started with $20 million, and today the company is valued at $12 billion. So it's a huge company, grown very, very fast. And M-Pesa came along to us fortuitously. It didn't come, by design. In the first 7 years of the company, I tried to make the company as innovative as possible and encourage innovation to a very large extent in our early years, because our target market was always the base of the pyramid. And I always wanted to have products that would encourage people at the base of the pyramid to use our network and to be loyal to our network. And although in 2007, when M-Pesa came along, we were the dominant company in Kenya. We were very successful. M-Pesa came along just, as I said, by accident. A guy by the name of Nick Hughes, who, by the way, is the father of M-Pesa, not me. I am actually call myself the mother of M-Pesa because I actually brought it to life in Kenya. But Nick was the guy who brought it to me and had taken it to various companies around Vodafone Group and said, would you try this product? And nobody wanted to try the product. But because we were a very innovative company, I said, let's try it. Let's see what it can do. And we trialed it for 6 months in 2006, basically as a microfinance product, but not as a mobile money product, but as a microfinance product. And it was successful, but not hugely successful. But my team came to me at the time, and I must give them that credit. They came to me at the time and they said, people are actually, when they receive the money from the microfinance company as a loan, they actually use the menu structure in M-Pesa to send that money to somebody else. So maybe there's something in it there. So we decided to give it a try. I was in Kenya, a very dangerous country. The board never came there very often, so I could be my own boss. And so I could take the money that I had for loyalty, and I could spend the money that I had for loyalty, I could spend it on M-Pesa. So I took this enormous risk of taking the $10 million that I had for loyalty for the following year and spent it all on M-Pesa. Of course, we could have made a huge mistake and been wrong, and then I wouldn't be standing here today. I would have been fired the following year. But we decided to give it a try. Why did we decide to do it the way we did it? The whole philosophy of Safaricom at the time was we wanted to not just to be a mobile phone company, but we wanted to be a company that would change people's lives for the better. And that was our philosophy right from the early days of 2000 when I first went to Kenya. Because as I said, we were Vodafone, and we were in the Vodafone family, but the Vodafone company was a very long way away. In London, they always thought Kenya was a very dangerous country, and lots of terrorists and all sorts of thieves around there, so they never came there too often. So we were on our own to make our own decisions outside the Vodafone philosophy, you would say. So this is why we sort of thought M-Pesa would be good. We didn't do it to make money. It's very clear. We didn't do it to make money. We did it to really change people's lives so that they would, would use the product, and because they loved the product, they would stay with us. But we did not know we would be so successful. I mean, many people say, I told you so. In fact, the central bank governor told me that, he even thought he invented M-Pesa, which was quite good for us at the time because he was the regulator. But, we did not know we would be so successful. And, we were a telecoms company, and that's all we were. So why, sorry, you made, I'm supposed to do this, right? Okay, whichever way it's supposed to go. I don't know which way it goes. Does it? Oh, that way, yeah. So when we launched it, why were we so successful with M-Pesa? Okay, first, people forget that we actually spent $10 million. So that helped a lot. But the other thing we decided to do, which many companies around the world have still not grasped the key of success of M-Pesa, is that we built a massive distribution network. Literally, what I wanted to achieve was I wanted to say to the team, if I stand at the edge of a village and I look down the road of a village, a typical African village, I wanted to see at least 2, maybe 3 M-Pesa signs. And if I couldn't see 3 M-Pesa signs clearly, then we were not successful, and they better go and find another job. That was the first thing I wanted to do. Then I wanted to have it like a what's the coffee shop called again? I forget now. Starbucks. So I want to be like Starbucks. Starbucks is, well, nowadays, like I shouldn't say it, but It's not the greatest coffee in the world, but because they have so many outlets, and you want a cup of coffee, you turn around, and there's a Starbucks. That's what I wanted for M-Pesa. So there would be an agency, an M-Pesa agent everywhere. So people would feel comfortable, even though they were not M-Pesa users, they would feel comfortable that if they did join this strange organization, they would have an outlet just down the road from them, no more than 300 meters from their house. That was the design of M-Pesa. Now you can think today, if you go to Kenya, practically the whole country is painted green, and you see an M-Pesa sign everywhere. It may not be an M-Pesa agent behind the sign, but there is an M-Pesa sign. And you would think that this is just the way it was going to, that everybody would just jump on this opportunity, but we didn't have many takers in the beginning. All of our telecom distributors did not want to touch M-Pesa. Why? Because we had to do KYC. That means people had to come in with their ID card, they had to do a photograph or a photocopy, they had to do a SIM swap, because our early SIMs were 8K SIMs, if you know anything about it, and M-Pesa was on the SIM card, it was a SIM toolkit, and so we needed at least 16K SIM cards, and we decided to go with 32K SIM cards, and they cost $1.25 at that time, so there had to be a SIM swap, ID, and the people, our dealers didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I put an ad in the newspaper, and Kenyans happily are very entrepreneurial people, and everybody jumped on this opportunity. So suddenly I had 40,000 agents. But remember, 40,000 agents with no money, no revenue, just an agent. They had to be trained. They had to be trained, and this is the other thing that people miss, is they had to be trained to behave like banks, because they are taking people's money. And these are poor people. So when they send their $10 to their uncle or to their aunt or to their grandmother, that's the last $10 they might have. And you can't afford to have somebody to steal the money, particularly your agent. So we had to be very disciplined with our agents. So we had a team of people going around the country doing mystery shopping all the time. So it was a very disciplined agent network. Also, the branding of the agent network had to be smart. If you go now and you see M-Pesa agents in India, or dare I say it, what was here in South Africa at one point, I mean, it was a disaster. They looked like they were going to steal your money. And we couldn't allow it, even if you go to Tanzania, by the way, today. I don't know if anybody's from Tanzania, but the agents there are just disgusting, because they look like they're thieves already, to start with. So, but you wanted your agents to look like they were not going to steal your money. So you had to brand them properly, paint them properly, train them properly. And basically, that's what made M-Pesa successful. It was everywhere. People started to use it, people started to love it, and it just grew like that. So in my first launch of M-Pesa, and I'll stop talking about M-Pesa now in a while, when I launched M-Pesa, I launched it together with the central bank governor, with the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Telecommunications on a big stage. And we actually transferred money from Nairobi to some place in the Aberdare somewhere. And we just prayed that it would work. I don't know if all of you in technology, when you're demonstrating something publicly, it generally does not work, So we even had a satellite coverage up there so we could see the guy receiving the money. But at that launch, I turned to my team and I said, okay, how many customers are we going to have by the end of this year? Having just invested $10 million, it probably was a bit late to ask that question at that point, having just busy publicly launching it. And they said, about 350,000 customers at the end of the year. And I said, you must be joking, surely. We're going to have 1 million. And they said, no, it's impossible, KYC, the dealer network, it's so difficult, change the SIM card. I said, I don't care. I want 1 million customers. If I don't have 1 million customers, this whole department will be gone by the end of the year. We'll fire all of you. And I was not known to be a very nice CEO, by the way, so I had the advantage that I used to fire people quite easily. Anyway, at the end of the year, we had 1.2 million customers. And from there, it grew. Today, M-Pesa is the most successful in the world. And it's not due to what was said many times, the market dominance. We were a very big company at the time. It was pure hard work and dedication and really going out of our way to make it really work. And I can tell you, somebody will no doubt ask me this question, why successful in Kenya and why is it not successful in every single country in the world? Well, it's because they did not do those things that we did in Kenya. Simple as that. And also laziness, sheer laziness and also desire to succeed. If you look at a telecom company, most of our business is voice and data. That's where we make our money. M-Pesa is a disaster from the beginning. It doesn't make money. As I said, we didn't think we would make money. Now we make money. But at the time, we thought we'd just break even. And even our cash flow projections said we would probably maybe break even cash flow-wise, maybe in our third year. And because of the demand of M-Pesa in terms of, a need to pay attention to your customers, pay attention to your agent network. It takes a lot of resources. And most CEOs of telecom companies are focused on voice and data, and they don't want this irritating thing called mobile money to interfere with their business and take away resources. And if you look around the world, and I did a study 10 years ago when I was still on the speaking circuit. I'm not really much on the speaking circuit anymore, but then I wanted to prove my point. And I looked at all the successful companies that were successful in mobile money, maybe 5 years ago. And I looked at those companies who were successful in terms of the scale of mobile money in their countries. And I looked at the personalities of the CEO. And you could match it perfectly. If the CEO was an entrepreneurial, demanding, domineering, basically a real bastard, we were successful. If they weren't, you weren't successful. And you can look around, and I defy you today. There are maybe 240 mobile money operators around, 240 mobile money operations around the world today, maybe a little bit more. Probably successful in terms of scale, not in terms of registered customers, but in terms of scale, it's probably still in 2 digits, no more than that. And that's quite a shame, actually. And you look at why not. Look at the management team, and that will be your answer. So I think I've tried to explain to you now why it's successful and why we did it. And now, where are we now with mobile money? Mobile money has changed. Mobile money, we took it from Kenya, we took it to Tanzania. By the way, in Tanzania, I can just give you an anecdote, and you can tell me if I'm speaking too long. Where's my host here? Yes, okay. In Tanzania, we had the CEO of Tanzania, Vodafone Tanzania. Look, don't work for them anymore, so I can say whatever I like, and no one could fire me, which is great. And we had a CEO in Tanzania who did not believe in mobile money. He said, every time I get a customer, it costs me money. I have to pay for a new SIM card, I have to pay commission to the agent, and there was one other cost, I can't remember what it was, registration of the customer, the KYC. He said, it just cost me money. But of course, he was an accountant, So this is how they work, an accountant. So it took 3 years in Tanzania for M-Pesa to take off, and now it's probably the second most successful, certainly in the Vodafone family, it's second most successful, and took off, but it only took off when he left the company, which is great. And then I'll give you another example of Mozambique. Mozambique was very interesting. Mozambique, I thought I was the smartest guy in mobile money for a long time. And eventually, when I stepped down as CEO of Safaricom, I went to London, and I worked for Vodafone, and I looked after M-Pesa on a worldwide basis. And Mozambique was always a real trial for me, because we never got going in Mozambique. And you would think Mozambique, with its rural district, with its long way it's structured, the poverty there, M-Pesa would be ideal. But people never took to mobile money in the beginning, particularly money transfer. They never really took to it. And we struggled like anything. The CEO there, who's a good friend of mine now, wasn't then at the time, but we struggled a lot to get it going. And then suddenly we made this connection that you could pay for electricity with M-Pesa. And electricity is really, really important. And I thought it wasn't important, electricity, but it was. As soon as we allowed people to pay for the electricity with M-Pesa, they suddenly saw a huge opportunity that the electricity, because it's all prepaid in Mozambique, and so they were allowed to pay. They could pay for electricity with M-Pesa, and suddenly it just took off. And now it is really, really successful. Of course, we've had failures. South Africa was a disaster, which you may remember, for those of you who were in the business. But in our family, the Vodafone family, we've been relatively successful. For me, India was the biggest challenge and disappointment that I could not get it to work in India, although I spent many, many months in India trying to understand why not. And that's another story for another day, why it wouldn't work. Maybe someone can ask me later on. But if you look at M-Pesa, where it's gone from where it was as just a basically money transfer business, now it is fundamentally part of people's lives in most of the countries where it's successful. We have many, many new products and services. You can do your banking with it. You can save money with it. You can borrow money, which I have a personal opinion about the borrowing of money, which I think has gone too far now. And actually, we're making poor people even poorer by allowing people to borrow money so easily on mobile money. But you have micropayments in the health industry, in the education industry, in the agricultural business, in the agricultural world. M-Pesa is working in education, paying for lessons, and many, many other functionalities and products and services now with mobile that you can do with mobile money. So it's really gratifying to see how it's grown. Probably where the most disappointing thing, I think, right now, and I think this is what this conference is all about, is sorry, I should have said this slide here. Sorry, I told people I don't look at slides. I'm sorry, I just talk. But you've seen how it's grown, and it's doing quite well, and it's growing very well in Southern Africa. Probably not South Africa, but Southern Africa, mostly Zimbabwe. Econet is doing really well with it. Mozambique is doing well. DRC is suddenly starting to pick up now. We pay most of the teachers in the army now with M-Pesa, so it's really beginning to grow. But I think where I think it's a little disappointing is in international remittances. It hasn't really taken off in international remittances as much as it should. Now, you mentioned the figures, what the values of the figures are, just moving money within Africa and to Africa. It hasn't really grown as much as we thought it would grow. Many people have jumped on the bandwagon thinking it would grow tremendously. And I think this is where we have to focus our attention as to why has it not grown as much. And probably there's something that you guys will talk about for the remainder of the day, but it still needs to grow more because this is, remittances cross-border within Africa and internationally is such an important part of mobile money, actually receiving the money, not like Western Union. I used to argue with Western Union in the early days. Of course, most of you are a lot younger than me, so you don't remember the arguments. I was telling you, I argued with MoneyGram for, I don't know for how many times. We never launched with MoneyGram. I don't think we ever launched with MoneyGram, M-Pesa, because of all this sort of blind and short-sightedness, I would say, or narrow-minded. And Western Union was the same. Western Union used to think they had a wonderful product. How can it possibly be a wonderful product where you send money from the US, when the money arrives at the Western Union agent, you have to now walk to the Western Union agent, take money out of the Western Union, and then walk home. Anybody who goes into a Western Union agent or walks in or out is going to get money. And that's an easy place to rob people. So why would it be such a good idea? And why would you charge people so much money for it? And I think herein lies the challenge here of international remittances is how much does it cost? And I think here you have to address yourself, and I hope the industry is addressing itself to the rip-off that you do with exchange rates, how much you charge people to change money from one currency to another, how much you charge people for the pleasure of sending their money to a mobile to a mobile wallet. I think that's something that we need to look at and see how we can make it easier and cheaper and less onerous for people to send money, not just internationally, but even across border. I remember when we first launched international regional money transfer across border from Tanzania to Kenya, the challenges that we had, and I hope is anybody here from the Gates Foundation? Oh, I'm so lucky. Okay, fine. Okay. So how they interfered in the process in Tanzania, tried to make it that this is how we should do it. You should be interoperability, it should be free, everybody should just have one platform. And it created a lot of problems for us in the beginning because the government listened to the Gates Foundation and said, no, we don't want to have money transfer from Vodacom, Tanzania to Safaricom. We want to have mobile money transfer from Tanzania to Kenya, one platform. So we don't understand why each of you have your own platforms. Of course, they forgot how much money we'd spent on each one of our platforms. So but nowadays it does work, but it's still not the easiest way to do things. And we still charge too much money, and there's too much red tape in moving money from, or not red tape, but form filling to do what you need to do. And of course, now we're doing banks. Banks are getting involved in mobile money and much more, particularly in remittances. And this is quite interesting. When we started out as M-Pesa in Kenya, the banks thought this was really a bad idea, M-Pesa. And in fact, they organized a meeting with all the banks, got together and organized a committee. And the way you kill something in Kenya is you ask embarrassing questions in Parliament. That's how you kill any new innovation. So the banks got together and they funded some politicians to ask questions in Parliament about M-Pesa. And the number of questions were, is M-Pesa a Ponzi scheme? Does the minister know that this is an illegal scheme, that actually all the money comes into Safaricom and we use it to build base stations and all these sort of things? And it was quite interesting how this debate got going. In fact, it's being repeated now in Parliament about something else which I'm involved in, which makes like a deja vu. But anyway, the minister at the time was a very old minister, not old, but he'd been around for a long, long time. And he was asked this question at one about M-Pesa being a Ponzi scheme. And of course, he didn't know anything about M-Pesa. And he said, he was caught at a press conference and the media asked him this question. And he said, I'll have my organization I have my department will investigate this M-Pesa thing and it will not end well. That was his words. Fortunately, I saw this interview on TV. So I rushed to his office the next morning and he was one of those ministers that actually came to work on time. And he actually arrives at the office at 7 o'clock. So I thought I'd beat him, I'll be there at 6:30, but actually he got in at 6. So he saw me waiting for him. And he said, Michael, what's this M-Pesa thing that you're talking about? And I told him about it, and he still didn't understand. And then I asked him, how do you pay your farm workers? Because I knew he had a farm in the Aberdares. He said, well, the foreman comes from the Aberdares, comes down here, we check all the salaries, and I send him to the bank. He gets money from the bank, cash, he comes here, we count it, and then he drives back to the farm. And that's how I pay them. I said, well, you can pay it from your phone in your office. And he said, no, it's impossible. So I said, okay, what's your foreman's number? And I knew his foreman was an M-Pesa customer. So I said, okay, I'll send him some money. So I did. I sent him 1,000 shillings or something like that, which is about $10. And the foreman called him and said, I've just received this money from Michael Joseph, what's happening? And I said, you see how you can send money? And he was so impressed. So he said, I'm going to take this right away to the old man, meaning the president of the country, and said, don't worry, leave it with me. 2 days later, a full-page advert appeared in all the major newspapers in Kenya, all of them, about 6 of them, full-page advert, not advert, a document from the ministry saying that they had audited M-Pesa. The central bank, the central bank and the Department, the Treasury, had audited M-Pesa, and there was nothing wrong with M-Pesa. It was fine. Well, they never audited us at all. That was his way of. And from then, we never had the banks sort of then started to integrate and started to realize that we were not the enemy. Actually, we were their friend. And nowadays, practically every bank in Kenya, not every bank in Kenya, has an M-Pesa a menu item on their mobile banking app. But what can we do more to improve, international remittances and regional remittances in Africa? So, I'm a director of MFS, so I should say that straight up. So you can say, so Dari may not like what I'm going to say. Okay, but I think our market is very fragmented. If you want to establish a corridor, it's so much work to establish a corridor from one country to another. All the KYC, the regulatory due diligence that you have to do, and get the permissions that you have to get, the licenses you have to get in some cases. It's quite a lot of work. And many people, as you know, many central banks are very concerned about moving currency money from one country to another, and they want to control it or know what it's all about, or even in some case stop it. And here I think we need to have a much more concerted, one view of how this thing should work. Perhaps the industry could have one standard. Maybe you do, I don't know. Maybe I'm not familiar enough, but one standard of regulations or specifications, how mobile money or how remittances should work and how they should be established. Also, it's a very fragmented market, and I think here, perhaps in the next 3 to 5 years, you'll see some consolidation in the market, particularly in Africa. There are too many players in Africa, too many mobile money players in Africa, some big, some small, and I just don't think it eventually will be that way in 3 to 5 years' time. So maybe your predictions about purchasing or acquisitions or consolidation will come true. Maybe in 3 years' time, but certainly no more than 5 years' time. And the other challenge I think you have to worry about in this industry is Alipay and these guys. These guys will eat your lunch for you for sure if you don't worry, if you don't look out. They will come. They are coming. They'll get into payments, which is easy. Payments is like anybody can do payments. But can everybody do remittances? And will they do them well? And how will they do them? And where will the platform sit? Will they sit in China or will they sit in Africa? These are things you have to start thinking about. When you see on that chart that you showed up there about Alipay, what's the other guy called? Tencent, what they will do. Be careful. They'll take your business away. And before you know it, all your currency will be in China. And that's something that you guys have to think about very carefully. I certainly am of the opinion that in 3 to 5 years' time, unless we make sure that our platforms are stable, they work, we do the right thing all the time as far as our customers are concerned, your customers will move steadily to Alipay and Tencent and things like that, because they work, they have scale, everything works. But do they have customer service? Can they deal with a query if your transaction doesn't work? I'm not so sure. But it's something that you guys, I think, you have to worry about. Then I think the other thing, the big thing I think that we have to worry about is the regulatory stuff. The regulatory restrictions when something goes wrong. I mean, you saw there was a terrorist attack in Kenya a couple of months ago. And all the money that was moved for this terrorist attack, for these terrorists that were caught or killed, came from South Africa to Kenya via international remittances, okay? Millions of dollars, okay? It came in via our mobile money, our M-Pesa network went to the banks, and the guy came and took the money out in cash, sometimes $1 million a day. And this is what funded this terrorist attack in Kenya 3 months ago. And we were, seriously questioned, talking about Safaricom now, we were seriously questioned about our systems. And fortunately, very fortunately, we actually had seen this movement of money, and it actually had been flagged properly. And fortunately, the regulatory authorities that have to handle these flags when they happen, when these alerts come up, did not do anything about it. But that I can't go into much more detail than that. But they did come to us and say, it's you that transferred the money, it's you that you funded this terrorist activity. But actually, this is why we had to have proper systems in place. We did have the systems, we did have the flags, it was flagged, but the authorities that can take the necessary action didn't act fast enough. But what was the immediate reaction from the regulators was to close down the corridor. That is what they wanted to do, and I think you've experienced it in other countries as well. As soon as something goes wrong, they close down the international corridors for money transfer. And that's why we have to make sure that our systems in place, our regulatory systems are in place, and that we can actually monitor and every single transaction, particularly if we work in dollars, as you know. And then on the other side, on our side, the things where we can control things, as I said before, is pricing. Are we really charging the right amount for these transactions? Are we overcharging the customer? Are we looking at the value of the transaction and what the rate should be for doing that transaction? And do we have very good back office systems to monitor and take action if a transaction just doesn't work? Do we have the necessary transparency in place to monitor this and to manage any questions that come along? I think in the next few years, I believe that regional and international remittances will certainly grow as people get more and more confident, as people get more and more aware they can do it from their mobile phone. It's actually surprising how many people don't know you can do an international remittance from your mobile phone. But I think as the industry grows, as your customers become more aware, from our side, from the mobile operator side, our customers become more aware, I think you'll see the volumes will grow, and I think our business will grow in value. So I think that's all I have to say for now. I believe I'm allowed to take some questions from you, and I'm happy to answer any question you may have, even embarrassing ones. Thank you.